Hey guys, welcome back to Mr. Danel's Social 9 podcast. This is Chapter 6, Episode 3. We're going to be going over what are economic systems. If I sound weird because I just got my Invisalign braces the other day, makes me talk a little funny. If you're following along in the textbook, I'm on page 204. And again, it's just going to explain what the different economic systems are, and you're going to see a spectrum or a continuum, basically line you'll see on page 204. So, what is an economic system? Basically, an economic system is a way to solve the basic problem of scarcity. Different ideas about how to best organize an economy result in different economic systems. You can put them on a continuum, like the one below on page 204. An economic system's position on the continuum is dynamic. Basically, that means that it can fluctuate. So, just because Canada is a mixed economy, which you'll see shortly, doesn't mean we're bang on in the middle of this continuum. Depending on what political party's in power, it can shift right or left. Okay. It depends on the underlying values of a society and its government. The positions of Canada and the U.S. on the continuum below on page 204 reflect a traditional perspective on differences between their economies. Their actual positions on the continuum shift right and left depending on the political party in power. So, when you get to page 204, or when you see it, take a look at that and see how the different countries vary with regards to how their political systems work. Also on page 204, you got two options here. You got privately owned. So privately owned means in economics, the part of the economy owned and controlled by businesses and individuals. So throughout this chapter, whenever you see the term privately owned, okay, it means people. Like you can start your own business, it's your business, you own it. Privately owned versus publicly owned. In economics, the part of the economy owned and controlled by the government and paid for by taxes. So publicly owned is owned by the government. Okay, so again, like the one below here that you're looking at, it's also on page 204. It shifts left and right. So if you look at right here on the continuum, basically a fancy word for a line here, guys. Mixed economy, Canada in the middle. If you shift to the right, which is more towards a market economy, it means less government involvement. So the USA is a shift right, okay, which means the government's kind of like hands off. You start your business. If you fail, you fail. If you succeed, great. Mixed economy, Canada means where we are much more market. So again, it's dynamic, it shifts. We are more market, but in a mixed economy, it means we have some government control and some privately owned. Okay? Versus a shift left, if you're looking at the continuum, more towards what's called a planned economy, that means more government involvement. Okay, so for the assignment that we're going to get to today, all you're thinking about is shift right means less government involvement. Shift left means more government involvement. So if the government is becoming more involved in any way, it's left towards a planned economy. If the government's giving up control to the people, it's less government involvement. Okay? So this is all on page 204. And it really breaks it down. So again, we'll start with the left here, planned economy, which is a shift left. At this end of the spectrum, government makes all the decisions about how to solve scarcity. It owns and manages the resources needed to produce things. It plans what will be produced and decides how to use limited resources. So again, here you're going left. The government owns the factories, the businesses. They decide what's made. They decide the prices, all of that. Characteristics, resources are publicly owned. The government makes decisions on how to use the resources, and individual consumers have little influence on economic decision making, which means the people have really little say in what's going on. And then you got a mixed economy, which is in the middle, which is where Canada is. A mixed economy combines private ownership and government control. For example, private businesses own some resources and the government owns others. In mixed economies, the level of government involvement fluctuates depending on what political party is in power. So I will say that we are much more towards market than we are planned. So I know on the continuum it shows us right in the middle, but we are significantly more to the right. Some characteristics of a mixed economy. Again, some resources are publicly and privately owned. Individuals and government both make decisions about what to produce, and individual consumers and government influence economic decision making. So both the government and people influence what's made. And then you get the market economy in the far right. At this end of the spectrum, the choices of individuals solve scarcity. Private businesses own and manage resources. They sell their products to consumers who make their own decisions about what to buy. Businesses succeed if they produce what consumers want. Otherwise, they fail. The government does not get involved. Okay? Essentially, it's a lot of fancy stuff that says you can make whatever you want. You can start whatever business you want. If people are willing to buy it, you will succeed. If people aren't willing to buy it, you will fail. Okay, so resources are privately owned, which means by people, individual people. Individuals make decisions on how to use the resources, and individual consumers drive economic decision making by choosing what to buy. Okay, so in a more market economy, and again, Canada is more right than it is really mixed right now, it's called voting with your wallet. Essentially, when you buy something, you're saying, I value this product, keep making this product. Okay? Brings us to assignment 7, which is economic spectrum. A little confusing, but all you're doing here is go to page 204 if you need help, or back to this previous slide that we were just on. You're using that, it's called a continuum, okay, or the line, and you're basically saying, is it a shift right or is it a shift left? Okay, if it's a shift right, you're saying the government is getting less involved. Okay, if it's a shift left, you're saying the government is getting more involved. So for example, the first one there says, it doesn't really matter what it's saying. All you need to know is the government getting more involved or less involved? So Publishers Random House and Fifth House receive a grant from the Canadian government to cover their expenses. Doesn't matter if you know what Publishers Random House is or Fifth House is, that doesn't matter. Is the government getting involved more or less? So example, the government gave them a grant, which means the government's giving them money. Is the government getting more involved? Yes, shift left. Okay, that's what you're doing for this assignment. Is the government getting more involved or less involved? So what is the difference between a political and economic system? Political and economic systems are linked, and what the difference is the amount of government control over the factors of production, the production and distribution of goods and services. Basically, again, you're looking at these three economies: mixed, market, planned, and how much is the government involved? So you're kind of answering these questions to determine what type of economy it is. Who's the boss of what is produced? So here you're basically asking yourself, who's deciding what to make? Okay, if you're able to start your own business, you're looking more towards mixed market. If the government's deciding what to make, it's definitely planned. How much is it to be made? Who should receive the goods? Again, where goods means products. And who owns the means of production, which means who actually owns the factories that build the products. Okay, there are 4 types. We really want to focus 3. The first one there is kind of an older one, which is for fun, but we'll go through it quickly anyways. So you got traditional economy, command or planned economy. Okay, the textbook refers to as planned, but it could be command as well. Market and mixed. So first, we got a traditional economy. Really uncommon in today's world, but this is economic decisions are based on past practices and the wisdom of ancestors. You're thinking more tribal things here, found in remote areas still in the world. And really, when you're thinking here, you're looking at trade. So not necessarily money, okay, but you're trading skills or products for each other in a traditional economy. Okay, then you got communism. I want you to take a look at this cartoon. Think about it. Okay, command or planned economy. Again, the textbook refers to as planned. You have 2 cows, and the government takes both and gives you the milk. You have 2 cows, the government takes both and gives you the milk. So here, you got the government taking over the means of production. The means of production in this case are the cows. Like the cows are the producing the milk, meat, whatever, in this case the milk. Okay? They're like, don't worry, we'll take care of this, and then we'll give you the milk, we'll sell you the milk. So they have control over the means of production, and they're deciding what to give people, in this case milk, who knows how much they're charging, etc., but they own the means of production. So what is a command or planned economy? It's an economic system in which government controls most, if not all, economic decision making. Examples: China, North Korea, Vietnam, former Russia. Okay, but like North Korea and China are the ones, they decide what's made. Okay, so in a command economy, someone in authority issues a command about what should be produced, how it should be produced, and who should receive it after it's produced. Those making commands, the government, about production must have the political power to make them. Basically, that means in order for a communist type economy to work, the government has to have a lot of power and support. The government must either own or control the means of production, which means they own the factories, or at least control the factories where the products are being built. And what's the worry? The worry with the command society is that it would inhibit the individual freedom to choose. Okay, basically meaning if the government can decide what products are being made, what the price is, if you don't want that, or you want more choices, think about all the tons of different brands of clothes you can get. All the brands, the chocolate bar varieties, and all that stuff. If the government controls it all, they might choose, say, this is the one this is the one everyone's going to get. Okay, so some pros and cons. There's always pros and cons to both, right? So some good things about a command or planned economy. Strong central coordination of the means of production exists. Basically means it can be really organized because the government's in control of all of it. If it fails, they can just get rid of it and move on. Comprehensive economic planning can be done, which means because the government's in charge of all of it, they can decide everything. Some of the cons, the bad. The task of detailed economic planning is large. If the government is not in touch with people's wants, then goods not wanted may be produced. So here you got a big issue. The government all of a sudden decides to make blah, blah, blah products. And they have no idea, like they're just out of touch with their people. So they're making stuff that nobody wants, nobody needs, and there's no other companies building those products people want to need because the government's in control of all of it. Basically, it relies on the wise decision-making of a government authority. It means the government, if the government's doing an incredible job, this can work. If they're not, it can fail miserably. Okay? And freedom to choose might be inhibited, which means might be lacking. Okay? So, because there's just less choice. Now we got market economy, the United States capitalism, and laissez-faire. Laissez-faire, by the way, means hands off. All right, so here you got your capitalism, market economy cartoon. You have 2 cows, you sell one, and buy a bull. Your choice, your risk, right? Your business. You have 2 cows, you sell one, and you buy a bull. Capitalism. Laissez-faire, meaning the invisible hand. The government was to regulate economy only if an injustice or unfair act was taking place. This basically means, in the U.S., if you succeed, you succeed. If you fail, you fail. The government really doesn't care. The only time they're going to step in is if something illegal is happening. Okay, so again, I'm on page 205 right now, and you're really starting to compare the two economies of the U.S. and Canada. I really want you to understand that in the U.S., it's about the public good is for both. So we got Canada cares about the public good. The U.S. cares about the public good. The difference is kind of how they want to achieve it. Okay, so in Canada, what you got, it's called the public good and cooperation. So some people believe that individuals must consider each other and set aside their individual interests to achieve what's best for society. This worldview values equity, responding to others in a way that recognizes their needs and circumstances. That's kind of Canada's philosophy with regards to economy. The public good and cooperation. Basically meaning, if we all give up a little bit, it's for the betterment of everyone. Canada, high taxes, free health care. Okay, think of that. The U.S. is the public good and individualism. So some people believe that what's best for each person individually adds up to what's best for society. Basically meaning, if everyone does what's best for themselves, it will add up to what's best for everybody. Okay, so it's the U.S. and Canada both want what's best for the public good, just different ways on how they set out to achieve that goal. Okay. I'm on page 206 now. So again, a shift left on the economic continuum is towards more government involvement. Okay. A shift left is usually described as taking a more liberal position. Okay. Shift left, more government involvement. Okay. Shift right, less government involvement, usually considered more conservative. So when people talk about shift left, okay, left view, usually it means more liberal. So again, Canada won, Liberals won, Justin Trudeau won, in Canada at least, okay, which means a more shift left, they want more government involvement. Okay, versus Alberta voted conservative, for at least for the premier. Shift right on the continuum, taking a more conservative route, less government involvement, kind of stay out of our way, kind of deal. So on page 206, we got the founding principle of Canada's economy: peace, order, and good government. The founding principle of Canada reflects the idea of cooperation. It connects to an agreement between Francophone and Anglophones that established Canada. The idea of cooperation affects Canada's economic system. For example, government plays an important role in the economy, making decisions on behalf of everyone. Canada is said to have a mixed economy because of the role government plays and because individuals still own private companies, both. Canada's position on the economic continuum is not static. Static means it stays the same. It shifts left and right depending on the political party that is in power. So an example, in 1963 to 1968, this was an example of a shift left, an aggressive shift left. So Lester Pearson, who's our prime minister at the time, to stay in power, the Liberals cooperated with the New Democratic Party. This resulted in legislation that gave government a larger role in the economy, including publicly funded health care and pensions for senior citizens. So during this time, when the Liberal Party won, okay, we got publicly funded health care and pensions for senior citizens. So an example of a shift right, Brian Mulroney became Prime Minister in 1984. As leader of a majority government of the Conservatives, he took steps to reduce government involvement in the economy, including cuts to government spending, privatizing government-owned corporations called crown corporations. So basically meaning crown corporations are businesses owned by the government. He was sold them to people. We're trying to get the government less involved, kind of like more like the U.S. The North American Free Trade Agreement with the U.S. and Mexico, which increased the influence of the market in shaping Canada's economy. So just interesting, how vastly different the economy can kind of shift depending on which political party is in power. And on last thing for here, or second last thing, page 207, what is a Crown Corporation? A Crown Corporation is a company owned by Canada's government to provide products and services to Canadians. The reasons for government to create Crown Corporations include to provide essential services, so things that we absolutely must have, to promote economic development, to support Canadian culture and identity. Economists say Canada has a mixed economy partly because of its Crown Corporations. The United States also has some publicly owned corporations, but not nearly as many as Canada. Here are some examples, this is on page 207 by the way, of some Crown Corporations from the past and present. So Air Canada was originally Trans-Canada Airlines, established by Canada's Parliament in 1936 and owned and managed by the federal government. Parliament decided to privatize the airline and sell it to private investors in 1988. Petro-Canada was established by Canada's Parliament in 1975. The purpose of Petro-Canada was to compete with foreign-owned companies in developing Canada's oil and gas resources. Today, Petro-Canada is owned by private investors. So, Air Canada used to be public, okay? A Crown Corporation is not. Petro-Canada used to be a Crown Corporation. It is no longer a Crown Corporation. And the last one here, this is a poster advertising a radio show in Alberta on Radio Canada. CBC Radio Canada is Canada's public broadcaster with an English language network and a French language network. It was created to promote bilingualism in Canada and to promote Canadian culture as distinct from American culture. So just some examples, you can Google more too, of Crown Corporations. Usually if it has Canada in the name, it is or at one point was the Crown Corporation. Okay, page 208, we got U.S. economy. Their founding principle, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The founding principle of the U.S. reflects the idea of individualism. It connects to the roots of the U.S. as a colony of Britain from the 1600s until 1776, and in fighting to become independent of Britain from 1776 to 1783. The idea of individualism influences the economic system of the U.S. For example, the U.S. generally values individual economic decision-making with little involvement of the government. The U.S. is often said to have a market economy because of its emphasis on the role of the individual versus the government. The position of the U.S. on the continuum, just like Canada, also can shift and vary depending on what party wins. In 1933 to 1944, this is an example of a shift left. So again, the shift left means more government involvement. Franklin Roosevelt became president of the United States during a worldwide economic crisis called the Great Depression. The Depression put millions of people out of work. It's kind of scary when you think of what's going on in the world right now. In the U.S., Roosevelt responded with a policy called the New Deal, which established pensions for senior citizens, funds to support farmers, and corporations funded and run by the government. These created jobs and built projects to strengthen the economy, such as dams and roads. So, shift left during this time, which was more government involvement. So think of the Great Depression. This is a time when people were scared to probably start businesses, okay, or spend money because they were trying to save everything. So the government stepped in and said, we will create jobs, okay, building dams, roads, etc., which are needed anyways, and then a way to strengthen the economy by paying people to do that, okay? And then 1980 to 88, shift right now, so we're now going towards less government involvement. Ronald Reagan became U.S. president in 1980. He wanted government less involved in the economy. He took steps such as reducing government spending and reduced government regulations of corporations, for example, on environmental standards. So when the government kind of gets out of the way and kind of says, you guys are in charge, it means shift right towards a market economy. Okay? And last thing here is on page 209. How do market economies work? Mixed and market economies are different but related. Economic systems in both systems that the individual choices of consumers are an important economic force. They add up to create overall economic decisions for society. Basically means we are the people, consumers. We are consumers. Anyone that buys anything is a consumer, and we are in charge of what we want. Okay? In pure market economies, consumer choice drives all economic decision making. In mixed economies, they drive a lot. So again, like I said, we're mixed, but we are kind of more towards the right. Okay, so how do consumer choices add up in mixed and market economies? Basically, supply and demand and competition. Think of gas prices, prices of products. When there's competition, okay, competition meaning different companies selling the same product or similar products. Okay, the amazing thing about competition is, one, it either reduces the price because they're competing with each other, or it drives up the quality of the product. Okay, that is it for chapter 6, episode 3. I know that was a long one. This is a long chapter, interesting chapter, but long chapter, and a lot to learn along the way. I will see you next time where we focus on supply, demand, and competition, and what monopolies are. Thanks a lot. See you next time.